Welcome, Your Excellency, His Excellency Minister of External Affairs of the Republic of India, Dr. Jaishankar. Thank you all. His Excellency, Minister of External Affairs of the Republic of India, Dr. Jaishankar, His Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Cyprus, Dr. Kassoulidis, His Excellency, Deputy Minister of Shipping of Cyprus, Mr. Dimitriadis, Her Excellency, High Commissioner of India to Cyprus, Ms. Matmohida Hazariga Bagat, Honorable Permanent Secretary of MFA, Mr. Cornelius Corneliou, distinguished guests. Firstly, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to moderate such an invaluable event that aims to enhance even more the mutual respect and close commercial and diplomatic ties between India and Cyprus. Cyprus and India enjoy excellent political and economic relations based on a long-standing friendship and close cooperation in various fora, such as the United Nations and Commonwealth. I firmly believe that today's gathering marks another great opportunity to discuss the further development of bilateral cooperation in critical economic sectors, such as trade, technology, shipping, and collective investments, just to name a few. As a business and investment center, Cyprus is one of the top 10 investors in India. At the same time, the island is geographically the closest EU member to India. This places Cyprus in a prime position for India in terms of direct EU market access, whilst it recognizes and appreciates India's contribution and its prominent and stabilizing role in South Asia. Therefore, the prospects for an enhanced and mutually beneficial cooperation are firmly in place. At this point, and without further ado, please allow me to invite the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Cyprus, Dr. Yannis Kassoulidis, for his opening speech. Dr. Kassoulidis, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Dear Minister of the External Affairs of India, Dr. Jaishankar, dear High Commissioner of India in Cyprus, Mrs. Matmohida Hazariga Bagat, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great pleasure that I join all of you today to the Cyprus-India economic event. I would firstly like to congratulate the High Commission of India for the organization of this excellent initiative, which aims to enhance the bilateral economic and business relations between our two countries. Today's event comes at a very timely juncture, as it is making place in the presence of the Minister of External Affairs of India and good friend of mine, Dr. Jaishankar. I had the pleasure yesterday to welcome Dr. Jaishankar at the Foreign Ministry, where we had the opportunity to discuss a plethora of foreign policy issues pertaining to our bilateral, regional, and European agenda. Cyprus and India have traditionally shared excellent relations anchored on common historical experiences. Parameters like the fight for freedom against colonialism and the mutual adherence to global values of peace, democracy, human rights, peaceful resolution of disputes and rule of law have brought our people closer and solidified the foundation of our strong friendship. Over the years, the two countries have progressively built on these historical ties, as testified, amongst other, by our joint membership and active participation in the Commonwealth, the United Nations, and other international fora. India is a key player in the political and economic area. It plays an important and stabilizing role in the neighborhood of South Asia, setting an example with its stand so that peace, security, stability, and prosperity can prevail. In the same vein, India has steadfastly stood in favor of reunifying Cyprus through a comprehensive settlement in line with UN Security Council resolutions. The multifaceted Cyprus-India partnership has steadily been growing stronger in recent years. The virtues of our 60-year-long friendship provide us with a unique opportunity to surge ahead, exploring new areas of cooperation. It is precisely for these reasons that enhancing relations with India forms one of the core pillars of our foreign policy. Economic ties are a common denominator to this effort, and that is why the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is striving to upgrade these relations, working closely with other stakeholders in Cyprus, both in the private and the public sector. There is an array of fields with untapped potential for cooperation in trade and investment, such as renewable energy, financial services, science and technology, information communication technology, research and innovation, pharmaceuticals, shipping, tourism, and education and culture. At the same time, there is recognition of the great scope for further cooperation as regards relations between the European Union and India. In this respect, we support the momentum of the negotiations of the EU-India Free Trade Agreement. Cyprus has a strong voice within the EU of the importance and the need to strengthen tangibly EU-India relations. Our world and our economies are faced with enormous challenges. A few years ago, we had to deal with the pandemic and the subsequent recession and disruption of value chains, and more recently, the war in Ukraine, the food and energy crisis, as well as inflation. Despite the hardships, the Cyprus economy shows signs of steady growth and remains committed to its policy for healthy public finances and contributes structural reforms which aim at enhancing the competitiveness of the economy. It is noted that one of the main pillars of our economic policy is the green and digital transition of the country, supported through funding from the European Union. For 2022, GDP growth is expected to be around 5.7%, and the projection for 2023 is around 3%, reflecting the heightened global uncertainty. Inflation has been increasing since September 2021, mainly due to the higher oil prices. 2022 figures are estimated at around 7.7%, and for 2023 is about 3%. It is therefore clear that Cyprus' economy is stable and is continuously working towards improving its business climate. It presents many opportunities for the investment across all sectors, and on our side we are strongly committed to working together with India with an aim to strengthen our important partnership, political and economic, at bilateral and multilateral level. I'm certain that today's event will bring us one step closer towards this goal. Thank you very much for the invitation to address this event. I wish everyone all the best for the new year. Thank you.
Dr. Kasoulidis, thank you so much for this warm-hearted speech. Our next speaker will be the Minister of External Affairs for the Republic of India, Dr. Jaishankar, who will give us his valuable insight into the current status and prospects of India. Dr. Jaishankar, please join us.
Foreign Minister Kasoulidis, Deputy Minister Dimitriadis, Permanent Secretary, High Commissioner, dear friends. First of all, let me say what a pleasure it is to be in Cyprus. This is a visit that I have planned for some time, and partly because of COVID, I think it is taking place later than I expected. But I certainly would like to thank the government of Cyprus and the Foreign Minister in particular for the very warm reception that I got yesterday. And I would like today really to share with you both my sense of the relationship as well as the economic cooperation possibilities that are inherent in it. The year 2022 is obviously a very special year in our ties. It marks the 60th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between us. As you would note from the backdrop behind me, we are also celebrating 75 years of India's independence. And I was very pleased yesterday that I had an occasion to join the President of the House of Representatives in releasing a set of commemorative stamps on this occasion, which were brought out by Cyprus Post. Now, insofar as our relationship is concerned, I think the institutional mechanisms have been very active, and we as ministers try to give them direction, certain motivation, and I think, Minister, the fact that you and I have met 3 times this year has certainly helped I think in that process. I see that our Joint Committee on Economic, Scientific, Technical and Industrial Cooperation had met last year, even though it was virtual, and the 5th round of our consultations at the Foreign Office were also held in 2020. So whether it is the political review or the economic review, I think we have certainly from the side of the government tried to keep the relationship very much on track. Now, let me say a few words about our economic cooperation. In June 2021, India reclassified the Republic of Cyprus in Category 1 of foreign portfolio investors in India. Cyprus is the 3rd non-FATF country other than Mauritius and the UAE to be given this exemption. And in December 2021, Invest India and Invest Cyprus signed a memorandum of understanding with the intention of enhancing our mutual investment activities and promoting overall business cooperation between us. Now, where our bilateral trade is concerned, it's gone up and down, understandably, because of the impact of COVID on both economies. Last year, the bilateral trade by our financial year was $214 million. I know we've hit higher numbers before. I'm very confident that we will do that again. I also want to emphasize that Cyprus is today the 10th largest FDI investor in India, with a cumulative investment of almost $12 billion during the period of the last 20 years. Now, the pandemic has actually highlighted the importance of stronger economic cooperation, perhaps most of all in the health and pharma sector. I do note that pharmaceuticals, iron and steel, ceramic products, electrical machinery are some of the major items of export from India to Cyprus. But if one looks at the basket of our trade, clearly there's a lot of potential there that we need to explore more. I also note that the Cyprus-India Business Association, which was established under the auspices of the Cyprus Chamber of Commerce in 2005, has been steadily progressing towards expanding our investment and commercial ties. Now, where India is concerned, I think it's a fairly objective statement today to make that we are getting increasingly prominent in the global economy. Our trade policies, reforms which were undertaken during this period, and the inherent economic strengths, all in a sense channeled by a clear economic vision of the Modi government, has contributed to our becoming one of the most strong destinations for inward foreign direct investment. Also, I think the technological and infrastructure progress that we have made in the last few years has clearly created a greater appetite in the world for investing in India, but it has also increased our own capabilities where trade and other economic activities are concerned. During the pandemic, we actually used this period to carry out very ambitious economic reforms. Some of these were in the making since 2014, but certainly the Make in India initiative and what we call Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is a sort of a self-reliance. It's promoting greater capacities within India. These were taken by the government in a much more focused way, and our intention, our goal is clearly to make India a major manufacturing hub and to emerge as a 5 trillion economy by 2025. I would particularly like to draw your attention to the successes we've had in an initiative called the Production Linked Incentive Program, which has a certain set of domains where we have pushed for investments in those domains through incentives with the idea of increasing production based in India. We are doing this not just for our own prospects, obviously that is important, but also because we believe that in the post-COVID era, the global economy will be looking for more resilient and reliable supply chains. It will be looking for multiplicity and redundancy in manufacturing. I think one of the big lessons which have come out of the COVID experience is that we have to de-risk the global economy with many more production options for global consumers. So it certainly is our strategy in the post-COVID era to position ourselves as a much greater manufacturer, as a much greater trader, as a much stronger service provider, and I think all these have direct implications for businesses in Cyprus. Let me also say a few words about the role that we played during the pandemic. I think even in the most difficult days of the pandemic, we were very conscious that we were part of the global community, and this was it was a shared fight against the pandemic. So we did, especially in 2020, we were very major exporters of pharmaceuticals. Our pharmaceutical industry stepped up to the challenge. It increased its production very significantly. So whether it was hydroxychloroquine or whether it was paracetamol or other medical items, in fact, during that period, we had exports to over 150 countries, many of whom were not part of our traditional markets, and many of whom were actually in Europe. The other contribution we made during the pandemic was to share our healthcare experience and expertise in our own neighborhood and also in Africa, because one of the big concerns at that time was that the global health response was very differentiated, and we did not want to see inequity insofar as African countries were concerned. When vaccine production and distribution started, we were one of the big global hubs to make vaccines, and we supplied vaccines to 101 countries, including to the United Nations for the use of its peacekeepers. So the traditional Indian belief in the world as one family, which incidentally is also a variant of that is our motto for the G20, I think was something which we put into practice during the pandemic years. A year ago, when my Prime Minister addressed the World Economic Forum, he actually made a very interesting observation. He said that during the Corona period, the world was focused on interventions like quantitative easing. But India was actually busy paving the way for reforms. Now, he also mentioned that the biggest projects for us at that time were to modernize the digital and physical infrastructure. And these really got unprecedented momentum during the pandemic. Now, the results of all of that, I think, are beginning to be visible. We are receiving the highest ever FDI flows in our history. Last year, we received $81 billion as FDI. We have become home to one of the world's largest startup ecosystems. We host close to 100 unicorns now, 40 of them a product just in 2021 alone. In fact, we have the third largest number of unicorns currently. Our trade has expanded very substantially. In the year 2021-22, for the first time, our exports crossed the $400 billion level. And this year, we have set ourselves a target of $470 billion. And the export target for Europe is a little in excess of $90 billion. And I say this because I think a larger trade presence, a stronger trade performance will clearly have a significance for a lot of other services and industry, particularly for shipping. I also want to mention that as part of the reforms that we have done in the last few years, these have included areas like taxation, bankruptcy and insolvency laws, agriculture, labor, and of course FDI policies. So as a result, really a very different India is today emerging with many more solutions to problems which have dogged us for a long time. And a lot of this I also want to highlight because it is a point of commonality with Cyprus. This is being done in a democratic framework with debate, with discussion, with a lot of confabulation, and with the buy-in of all the relevant stakeholders. Now, we do recognize that we live in a globalized world and that anything which happens today in one corner of the world will inevitably impact every other part of the world. We can see that very graphically when it comes to the Ukraine conflict. We saw that earlier when it came to the pandemic. And as I said, today the efficiency and the delivery of global supply chains, I think, is a common concern today for all countries in the world. For us, the main anxieties, which in a sense I share with you today, concern energy, both the affordability and the accessibility to energy, to food grains, to fertilizers, and this is not just our concern. I think it's a larger concern in the global south, and it's certainly a worry that we intend to take up very strongly during the presidency of the G20, which we have taken over on the 1st of December. In terms of the impact of the reforms and the easing of regulations that I've spoken about, it's not just stronger economic, stronger export growth and ramped up capital spending. This has really translated into a fairly robust GDP growth. We are still looking at the ballpark figure of somewhere between, take 7% GDP growth plus minus. And this would certainly be among the highest among the larger economies of the world. As an important tourist destination, I thought I should share some thoughts on that subject with Cyprus, in Cyprus as well. It's again, we are moving very aggressively to promote tourism. But I would like to share with you that there's also a big outflow of tourists from India. In fact, I was telling the minister yesterday, I go to a number of countries as part of my travels and see that Indian tourists are among the top 3 or top 5 tourism providers. And this could be from Thailand and Maldives to even the Caribbean. Since it is one of the mainstays of your economy, I do believe it is a sector perhaps where we need to give more attention in terms of our future collaboration. A second sector, I think, which merits a special reference is the IT sector. Even the IT industry has actually matured enormously in the last 2 decades. So that old imagery of India as the back office of the world, we may still be that, but I think we've grown well beyond. The era of the knowledge economy, I think, is seeing much more, not just contract manufacturing and engineering outsourcing, but actually a much more integrated innovation and even inventions in which Indian companies are part of the global economy. In fact, even in an area like the manufacturing of chips, which is today very much, it's right up there in terms of global competition. I heard in the US that American companies alone actually have employ more than 40,000 engineers in that business in India. So the message which I really bring to you is that today India is a trusted partner when it comes to global supply chains. We are working on free trade agreements with different countries to promote business. Obviously, the one with the European Union is under negotiation. This decision was taken at the Porto summit. I think the government of Cyprus was very helpful in moving the European Union in that regard. We are very deeply appreciative of that. This year, we actually concluded 2 agreements, one with Australia, one with the UAE. We have a number of other agreements on which we hope to make progress. As I said, in terms of technology and innovation, there is a lot happening of India which should be of interest. Again, perhaps the sector which I should mention is the renewable energy sector. When it comes to startups, there's a lot of energy out there. And we are trying to actually see how we can, in a way, harness the energies and the creativity of Indians in the diaspora in that regard. So, before I conclude, I would like to perhaps also flag the climate action issue, because I think wherever you go in the world today, that is a common concern. The last year, 2 years have actually brought home to each one of us today that this is not a hypothetical threat. This is not something which we said would happen one day in the future. I think it's already happened last week and last month and last year. Certainly, I think for fragile topographies, it is something which is of growing concern. What I again want to emphasize here is, as a country which home to 17% of the world's population, we today contribute about 5% of the world's emissions. But we may be contributing 5% of the emission, but our commitment to tackle climate change is 100%. And we have led not just by expanding massively our renewables at home. One of the big initiatives we are currently working on, we want to use the G20 presidency to advance that, is actually to advocate a change of lifestyle. That we do believe, my Prime Minister feels very strongly that changing lifestyles would actually make a big difference to the environment. We have also been leaders on 2 international initiatives. One of them is the International Solar Alliance, and I'm really very gratified yesterday that the Republic of Cyprus has chosen to become a member. And the other is a coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure, which is something which all coastal areas, I think, and obviously island states have a particular interest in examining and partnering. Currently, about 40% of our energy mix comes from non-fossil sources. And I can say this, that at a time when global pressures are taking the world away from the Paris commitments and away from the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Commitments, we are staying true to both of them. I think among the G20 countries, we are on course to deliver before time on whatever we agreed to do in Paris. Finally, let me in a sense sum up the changes in India in terms of what they mean to our relationship, because my intent was obviously to familiarize you with a lot of what is happening in India. But you would ask yourself, how is it relevant to your business or to your policy making, or in a sense to your national concerns? I would really say there are 7 areas which India and Cyprus should examine between themselves. One, of course, is the world of finance. The world of finance, because Cyprus is an important pathway for financial flows into India. And if you're looking at an economy which is going to grow at 6.5% plus, perhaps significantly plus in the coming decade, then it is certainly, for us, your value will grow with time. For you, we are a partner of a growing relevance. The second is shipping. Shipping, because as I said, we are doing everything to make ourselves into a stronger manufacturing power, but also a more competitive agricultural exporter. So there will be many more products going out of India, and given the rate of growth that I am placing before you, coming into India. The third is tourism. Tourism, because if you look really at the evolution of global tourism in the last 3 decades, wherever there has been a significant bump in prosperity, so you saw this with Japanese tourists, then Korean tourists, then Southeast Asian tourists, then Chinese tourists. So the coming wave will be of Indian tourists. And coming wave will be of Indian tourists going out, but also a very conscious effort by India to attract tourism. The fourth relates to the knowledge economy. The knowledge economy, which is, we will live not just in a world of chips, but increasingly in an era of artificial intelligence. It will require a different set of skills, a different kind of industry, much stronger connections between economies, even if they are separated by distance. And related to that, my fifth point is we will have to promote a culture of mobility. In the world, where there is demand will not necessarily be where there is demographic advantage. So how do we even out the demographics and the demand? I think this is going to be a big challenge. Today, with a number of members of the European Union, we are negotiating mobility and migration agreements. We have done this successfully with Portugal, with Denmark, with France, just recently with Germany. Yesterday, we signed a declaration of intent to do so with Cyprus. Day after tomorrow, I'm going to be in Vienna. I look forward to doing something similar out there. But what I do want to emphasize to you is that today, India is a source of talent and skills. And in a more globalized economy, in a more knowledge-driven economy, I think those flows are something which we need to address. Then I think given how comfortable we are with each other, it's also worth a thought whether India and Cyprus could actually work in third countries. Third countries possibly in Africa, maybe in other parts of the world, where we both have some historical presence and some networking and some comfort levels out there, whereby pooling our relationships, we will be able to do much more than we have done so far. And finally, I want to drive home the point that where the Mediterranean is concerned, it is a region of growing interest to us. Obviously, it's a right thing for me to say in Cyprus, but I want to point out to you that if you look at many of our other relationships in the last few years of countries in the Mediterranean, both North Mediterranean and South Mediterranean, there's been very visible intensification of those ties. So I speak to you today, therefore, as a foreign minister of a country that is globalizing very rapidly, whose footprint and whose interests and whose influence will expand with time. And as it does so, I want to really make you all understand that this is a region where there will certainly be more of India. And when that happens, for us, the relationship with Cyprus is something which will be an anchor in that respect. So once again, I'm really very pleased I had this opportunity to place some of these thoughts before all of you. And again, it's really a very deep pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much, Dr. Jayashankar, for sharing such an insightful speech on the numerous reforms that obviously India has embarked on, and obviously the main initiatives around the key economic pillars, the pandemic, the supply shock, and everything else that you actually mentioned. With shipping and trade being two key pillars for both our economies, let us welcome the Deputy Minister of Shipping of Cyprus, Mr. Vasilios Dimitriadis. Mr. Dimitriadis, if you could be so kind to join us.
Excellencies, External Affairs Minister of India, Foreign Affairs Minister of Cyprus, High Commissioner, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to address such a distinguished audience. Well, when we refer to excellent bilateral relations, a clear, concrete example is, of course, shipping. Both countries, both great maritime nations, they do have in place a merchant shipping agreement since 1997 that was revised and updated in 2017. We do have a great relationship when it comes to the International Maritime Organization. Currently, there are 7,000 Indian seafarers that they have a Cypriot Siemens book, which means that around 15% of the seafarers working on board Cyprus ships are Indian. And since, Your Excellency, you referred to the pandemic, I must inform you that during the pandemic, Cyprus was one of the first countries that treated seafarers as essential workers. We made possible the repatriation and crew change of more than 65,000 seafarers. We were the only country globally that proposed a global vaccination program for seafarers adopted in the form of an ILO resolution back in April 2021. And we have endorsed as a government a national vaccination program to cover 40,000 seafarers, and a great number of these seafarers were Indians. We are very happy to share this information with you. When it comes now to the EU, both ministers referred to the support that Cyprus provided during the FTA negotiations with the EU. I must also inform you that you can count on Cyprus as being a good ambassador of India in Brussels. I can refer to the example of the ship recycling, which is an important sector for India, and we are struggling with our EU partners also to promote the Indian recycling and dismantling yards as being approved by the EU, which is going to be very important for our industry. Now, turning to the greening of the sector, it's clear that the shipping sector should have a meaningful contribution to climate change. There are a lot of initiatives in place, both within the EU and globally, and we do believe that to make that change, and I do agree with you, it needs a different mindset. We should change the culture, how we are approaching the whole thing, and it should not come only by demonstrating our high level of ambition, just by committing in some goals for 2030 or 2050, but we should sit and discuss and realize each other's interests, potential, in order to bridge the gaps and reach a global solution. Because climate change faces no borders, shipping has an international character, so we have to work together, and this is a message that Cyprus is open to better understand the views of India and even try to bridge the gap between the EU and India in order to make progress within the framework of IMO. Now, referring to a number of business opportunities for the maritime transport sector for Indian enterprises, but also for Cypriots, it is important to inform you that during the last decade, during Anastasiadis' government in office, we have managed to triple the number of shipping companies in the island. From 97 back in 2012 is more than 300 already. So this means that there is a lot of potential for the Indian market to explore further in Cyprus. Cyprus is not only a ship owning and ship management center, but we do welcome companies that they invest on marine technologies, on insurance, on cyber security for ships. So these are all new, I must say, developing industries and prospects. And I'm aware that in India, you have also promoting and developing this sector, so there are clear synergies between both sides to further develop this. Last year we have launched a strategy under the name Sea Change 2030, where for us C stands for S for sustainability, E for extroverted, and A for adaptability. It's a new way of approaching this sector. We want to be more extroverted, to communicate a better image for the sector, to collect intelligence for the industry, and to prove that as regulators, we should be facilitators to the shipping industry. So we are ready to hear, and then to become more adaptable, to adapt all the new information and intelligence in our policies, in our legal framework, and in our strategies, and turn them to sustainable actions. This strategy presents 35 sustainable actions, and there is enormous opportunity throughout these actions for both sides to further develop. I can name a few. We have green tax incentives. We engage on a lot of trials for the use of biofuels and non-fossil fuels on our ships, which we can engage either G2G or G2B or B2B on common projects. We are promoting remote audits on board ships, and I'm sure that there are a lot of companies that are exploring these technologies, and we are open to discuss and create the framework conditions for all these companies to prosper. So on this, there are great potential. Allow me to refer also to another sector of great importance for Cyprus, and I'm sure for India, is the blue economy, which is all about, is the notion of maximizing the growth potential of our seas in a more sustainable way. In Cyprus, we have just developed our maritime special plan, and by March next year, in 3 months' time, we are going to apply the legal framework. We have a clear identification of maritime zones in our EEZ, and some dedicated for renewable energy, some for fish farms, others for tourism. So on that, we will be inviting any potential investors to use this opportunity and invest on our seas. And our bill is very, very clear that any application that comes on our table, it should be evaluated and approved in 6 months' time at the latest. You referred to the ocean, to the importance of the ocean. Is under the Sustainable Development Goal 14 of the United Nations. Cyprus is working a lot on the protection of the oceans, and we do believe that there is a great potential for the Commonwealth countries to unite their voice, and for this reason, Cyprus proposed to the Commonwealth to host an ocean ministerial summit for the Commonwealth countries, because it's worth exploring together a Commonwealth agenda for the oceans. This will take place later in 2023, and we'll be glad to have here in Cyprus our Indian counterparts to further explore this opportunity. So, to conclude, I do believe that there are great opportunities for both countries in the area of maritime transport sector, in the area of blue economy, and we are open to invite and facilitate Indian enterprises to work with us for a greener, smarter, and more socially responsible maritime sector. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dimitriadis. Well, if it's one thing I think that this event has certainly very tangibly demonstrated, is the multiple avenues for collaboration, for joint work, and for the opportunities that the two countries can actually enjoy. But I will stick to one thing. I think with the foundation of 60 years of friendship, there isn't anything that cannot be achieved on that sort of basis. So I will take that as a cornerstone of where things can actually expand, they can grow in any possible dimension, and it will bring our cultures and our ties even closer. And I think with that, I would like to thank all the excellencies for your time and your very insightful speeches. I'd like to thank all our distinguished guests for joining us today, and please join us to our lunch reception where we can actually expand on all the topics that